Okay, welcome everyone to our Soul Purpose series. I'm really excited to welcome our guest today. Rochelle Schiek is the founder of Qoya. She is an author and she is someone that I very much personally look up to. So I was thrilled when she accepted this interview. Now, Rochelle has a lot of initiatives and she's built quite the business. So instead of trying to introduce her myself, I'm going to let her introduce herself to you guys, the viewers. So welcome, Rochelle. Thank you so very much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you everyone that's here. It's amazing the way that technology allows us this opportunity to really gather and be together, and I really am so grateful for the opportunity for that right now. And what I do really simply is I created something called Qoya, and Qoya is based on the idea that through movement we remember, and we remember our essence is wise, wild, and free. And wise, wild, and free also draw reference to the movement forms that we practice in a Qoya class. So wise, calling on the wisdom of yoga; wild, the creative expression and dance; and free, expanding our capacity to actually enjoy being in our body. Specifically, I mostly work with women, so enjoy being in a feminine body. And it's meant to be this opportunity to really transition from going through the motions of daily life, of survival, like I have to pay the bills, I have to do this, and into those moments in time where you see a sunset and your whole body exhales. When you get caught up in the contagious laughter of a child and you are enchanted. When you feel the fulfillment of doing your soul work in the world. And it's like you feel so fulfilled, like you did it. When you feel the warmth of your lover's body in bed and it's just this visceral heat. When you catch up with a girlfriend and at the end of the conversation you honestly believe everything is going to be okay. Qoya is based on the idea that through the movement of our body we can shift our perceptual awareness from going through the motions into really being here, into really being present. And so I really believe that movement is the key foundation of this experience. And so I know with you and yoga and with a lot of our practices, the body brings us into the present moment.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the eyes, what am I seeing right now? What am I hearing right now? What am I smelling? What am I sensing? What is the touch right now? And that the present moment is where the power is. It's where the healing is. It's where it all is. That's where the party is in the present moment. So then to support that, once you've had that awakening, that remembering, that experience through the body, through Qoya, we also do a lot of rituals. So fire ceremonies, gratitude ceremonies, visioning ceremonies. We do a lot of gatherings, so classes, workshops, retreats, teacher trainings, and then pilgrimages where I've led over 50 retreats for women to go into the middle of the Amazon jungle, to India, to goddess temples, to Africa, to do service and safari, to Costa Rica, to just be in an alive, vibrant, connection with Mother Earth, as well as, in the States, going and teaching at Kripalu, renting houses in California. So from big to small, from as far as you can go across the world to next door, with this idea that when we step out and we travel with intention and we go on a pilgrimage where we offer ourselves to be in conversation with the world around us through our lived experience versus just through our head. Okay, this part of the world is what it is because I read a book about it. I saw a movie about it. This is what I think about it. Versus to have an experience with not only the world but ourselves through our experience. So in many ways, what I'm really passionate about is embodied experience and people to trust their own resonance with their own embodied experience.
That's amazing. I always like to ask people, because at this point you are offering trainings, you're offering retreats. Qoya is an international movement and it has grown so much. So whenever I speak to people who have established such a big platform or career or venture, I'm always curious to know what day one looked like. It wasn't always this big movement and this big platform. So how did you even begin to build this, the first little building blocks?
Well, how it began was I was in a women's circle. So, like, we're gathering today to have a conversation and share ideas. I was in a group of women, and one of the women was a very successful businesswoman in New York City. And so she rose her hand and she said, "Everyone is telling me I need to get out of my head and into my body, but I don't know what they're talking about. Like, if they're talking about fitness," she said, "I'm screwed, because for me," she reflected that the gym is torture, that she thought yoga was boring. She could never get in the right level dance class. And she tried pole dancing and that hurt her back. So she was just in this place of like, if it's movement, if that's how I'm supposed to get in my body, like, I don't even know where to start. And so I heard what she was saying, but I also heard this thing underneath what she was saying. Like, it wasn't about fitness. It wasn't about burning calories or strengthening or stretching. It was really about arriving in her body, like having the eternal part of her spirit take residence in the always changing, impermanent form of her physical body. And as this was happening, and it was happening quite quickly, I realized in that moment for the first time that was how I had always related to movement. I loved yoga because when I did yoga, I felt this connection with my spirit. And I loved going to the gym because I loved being really attuned to the capacity of my own body. And I loved dance because I love this opportunity to express emotionally through my physical gesture. And then I loved pole dancing. I got into divine feminine, movement because I loved changing my relationship as a performer. I grew up as a dancer. And when I went into a pole dancing class, the lights were turned down low. You could barely see anyone else. And it was really this opportunity where I was giving the movement to myself as a gift, where the movement was to nourish and commune with myself versus to entertain another. And so all of a sudden I realized, movement is how I connect with myself. That's how I remember who I am. That's how I express who I am. It has nothing to do with the way that I'd been trained to relate to movement in my culture. So I said to her in that moment, I said, "Listen, I think there's a question underneath your question. And I'm inspired to say, why don't we do a class where it'll be a little bit of yoga, a little bit of dance, a little bit of feminine movement. Doesn't matter what it looks like. And we're just going to focus on how it feels and how our body really wants to move. And so let's just explore, how can we feel the most like ourselves through moving our body?" And so it started. That was day one. It was just a Sunday night in New York City, and 15 other women. I put it out there and they're like, "I want to try this too." And then that's how it began.
That's awesome. What really struck me is when, your components, you have some yoga, you have some dance, but then you have some more feminine, sensual practices and movements like pole dancing or whatever it may be. Right. And hearing you talk, it's like, I've had a very similar path where I grew up dancing ballet, and then I was introduced to yoga, and then I really felt like something's missing. There's a third piece here that I feel like it's not, I need to fill it. And I wasn't quite sure what it was. And sure enough, just like you, I went to pole dancing classes or, dipping my toe into lots of different kinds of movements and realizing wow, it doesn't matter what the practice is. It's the sensuality, it's the femininity that was really lacking in my yoga practice, which had become increasingly yang and increasingly, action driven and kind of masculine in its nature. And I wasn't dancing anymore. So I had lost that connection to the feminine. So I realized this is what I'm longing and searching for. But I didn't know, why do you think it's so important for us to be integrating sensual movements that connects us to our femininity? Why now? Where is there such a desire and a longing to have more of that in our lives?
If you look at anything in the world right now where it feels out of balance or destructive, just take anything. And I think you can very clearly see the missing component to its sustainability, to its functionality, and to its betterment of all beings instead of just a few, is the lack of feminine presence in it. So I believe that there's this collective call that's coming up, not only in women, but in humanity, to really embrace the aspects of the feminine, of nurturing, of sensuality, of embodiment, of deep feeling, of empathy, of creativity, of the ability to not be so linear, goal orientated and strategic, and to really create spaciousness to allow what's true to emerge without controlling it. And these sensual movements are just the physical embodiment of that energy, which we are so longing to bring to our school system, to our politics, to our healthcare, to our relationships, to our work. You know, there's a trend in any public aspect of life that is sort of at its, final experimentation point, that if it continues in this way, it's showing its model as pretty much not sustainable. And same with our bodies. If we just negate our inherent sensuality, if we dismiss the emotions that come through that are very natural and actually really serve us to have meaning and connection in our lives, if we ignore our essence, our feminine essence, it becomes unsustainable. And so the movement is just like this sigh of oxygen to the soul, not only for the feminine, but for wholeness. It's not like, that the strategy or the linear thinking or the goals are bad. It's just, but if they're not balanced with some heart and with some emotion and with some pleasure, then what's the point? And so it's like, we need like air traffic controllers to show up and have like, their masculine energy, whether they're a man or a woman, but like, yeah, you need to be paying attention, and you can't like just be like taking a break 15 minutes longer than you said. And like, you need to be here. But then when someone loses a loved one in their life, we need them to not be concerned about getting to work. We need them to show up with their heart open, and we need them to be present with us. And we need them for a second to just feel our pain, just for a second. They don't have to take it on as their own, but we're losing the ability as a culture, hopefully so that we can find it again. But there's so many women like you and I and so many people that might be listening to this that are just, the awakening is in your bones. You don't need anyone to tell you. You're like, I'm so tired. I'm so tired. I'm so exhausted. It's like, you need to rest.
Yeah.
Like, I'm working so hard. I've lost the inspiration. You need to do something that's fun.
Yeah.
This is not rocket science, but it's just not taught or encouraged. And sometimes somehow got in the category of being indulgent, which is so then there's like some shame. It's like, if you're having fun, or if you're getting a massage, or if you're taking care of your body, which if your body feels better, everything else is better, that's somehow like something you need to hide. I mean, it's really like, if you really go deeper with it, it's really psychologically concerning. But yeah, those are some of my reasons around why this is coming through, is because it's the medicine of this time, and it is the most intelligent response to the challenges of this particular present moment.
I'm so glad you brought up the topic of self-care, because I've really started to notice the languaging and the terminology that we use around those kinds of practices. And it's always like, indulge in self-care, do something naughty and get a massage. And it's really strange that we have to kind of market and package it that way to get people interested in it, because self-care should just be something you do, like you brush your teeth in the morning and you prepare a meal. And self-care should not be something that you have to like, ooh, I'm going to do something bad, or like, ooh, like I'm going to treat myself and actually, take an hour of silence or meditation or whatever it may be. But I've really become acutely aware, even me as a yoga teacher, how I've gotten caught up in that languaging, and how I even started to use that languaging when I was, promoting a yin yoga workshop, for example, right? And calling it an indulgence. But really, I don't I don't want those things to be considered indulgences. I want them to be considered just a natural, regular part of your life because they're what we need. So I just thought it was really poignant because I was just writing about that yesterday, actually, doing my little rant of the self-care terminology. But I want to bring it back to sustainability and balance, because I really do feel intuitively that we, of course, will need to be able to balance our feminine and our negative aspects of ourselves, or feminine and masculine, aspects of ourselves. I wonder how you do that. And maybe this is just me projecting or wanting my own answers, but when you are very career driven, when you are running a business, when you are setting goals and you've built such a big, business or a big platform, where does the feminine even fit into that? How do you even achieve balance while trying to, keep all these balls in the air and trying to keep up with achieving goals? Because it's not necessarily a bad thing, right? Like, you have a vision for where you want Qoya to go and where you want yourself to grow as a speaker, an author, a thought leader. Where does the feminine fit into that?
Well, it's been interesting for me because I've been living into the experiment that what I teach is not separate from how I run my business. So, some examples of that would be like the team that I work with. Like, I don't micromanage them. I really want to create inspiration and empowerment for them to find what they like to do the most, what they're the best at, and then to do that. And it's really this thing of also feeling like the feminine loves to nurture. It's like, I want to nurture them in every way that I can so that they're feeling inspired, because that's going to be the most sustainable thing for myself, to have a really positive, trusting relationship. And then also for them, so they're getting more than a paycheck. And then also for the business, that the work that they're doing vibrationally holds a reverence and a respect versus it going through the motions. For me in Qoya's growth, one of my mentors said to me when I started and said, listen, like, I've seen a lot of spiritual teachers, a lot of people build a lot of things, and I'd love to share with you what I've learned. And I said, of course. And he said to me, the number one thing that most people fall into, the trap, is they get into the Western mindset. They think more is better. And then they lose their lifestyle and they lose their connection to their teaching because they're managing something that is so big. And so he said to me, don't lose your lifestyle. Like, don't worry about making things bigger, make them deeper. Because if their work you do is actually deep, if it actually makes a positive impact and transformation on people, it will grow organically at the rate at which it can be sustained by the ambassadors who are standing alongside you. So Qoya, I never had a goal to have hundreds of teachers. I never had a goal to lead 50 retreats. I had a goal to stay present and to offer the most that I could in each experience. So if 2 people showed up to a class, if 40 people showed up to a class, I would just give everything I had. And I really believed in Qoya. Now, that being said, like, I work a lot, like, I don't, I'm really inspired. I'm really grateful, but I spend a lot of time teaching, a lot of time traveling. And on my days off, where I'm like working from home, I'll spend a lot of time in front of the computer working. I work hard, but it's also like I work smart, like I work inspired. And if there are days where I'm not inspired, I actually don't force myself to do things. I actually just rest until I'm aligned in a way that I can do it well. And, sometimes I suffer the consequences of that. And I think, to be really honest, I think a lot of people that I work with, I'm very grateful for their patience, because if they send me an email, they don't get a response in 3 hours. Right. I don't orientate my whole life around my computer, and especially when I'm teaching. And so there are times where I just have to trust my intuition, where I just can't respond to everything. So I have to pass things on and delegate more and more. But even just in my personal life and managing all these things, I'm asking other people to step into the feminine with me, to know that I'm not going to spend 4 hours a day answering emails.
Yeah.
And
Making those clear boundaries. Yeah.
you know, and that is not an indication of my care or my love or my commitment.
Right. Right.
And so it definitely is, I don't feel that it, like, there's a map of how to do it, but the way that I do it, to answer your question, is I stay true to what feels right in my body.
Mm. Which is hard work. You have to be diligent, right? You have to be really committed to making that a daily continued practice. So I would love it if you could tell us, because you haven't mentioned it yet, but I know that you have written a book and you are an author now. And, you and I have talked, and I would love it if you could share some of that process of what it means to actually put that together and launch it into the world, right? Creating this new venture and putting yourself out there in a completely different way.
Of course. Well, I would say that most people listening to this, I'm going to venture that there's a call inside to create something. Could be a song, could be a book, could be a baby, could be a business, could be a home, could be a garden. And that call to create is what I really believe that we all are here to remember, and to create and co-create our lives, our world, so that the external mirrors what we feel internally. And sometimes we look around at the world and we don't see the external world as a mirror of the love inside of ourselves. So our creations start to bridge that gap and allow us to see more of the truth of us inside, outside. And again, it could be anything, but for me, it was this book. And it was this book specifically as a map, because something that I really uniquely felt called to do was step out of the momentum tunnel of society, where I was in a relationship for 6 years, we were probably going to get married, where I was in a job that if I stayed with, I would probably eventually become the CEO, where I was in sort of just like the cultural prescription of what you do to, be good or make it or blah, blah, blah. And I just realized this wasn't a choice for me. This was something that something outside of myself told me to do. I didn't choose it. So I quit everything, bought a one-way ticket to India, and for 1 year practiced living by my intuition, what felt right in my body. And so I went all around the world, 360 degrees, and really practiced what it is like to live that way. And then I was really curious, okay, well, how do you do that in a way where you also can like pay your phone bill? Like, I know what it's like. I had a job, so I had a little bit of savings, enough that I could live very, very simply as I traveled. But it's like, okay, well, I can't just travel forever. I mean, I guess maybe I could, but but it's like, what is like the practical integration into the world?
Yeah.
And then I realized, okay, I don't know one person on the planet who's done that in a way that I recognize. I don't know anyone. At that point in my life, this was like 10 years ago, there's no one I knew that I could sit down with that I felt like had honored what they really wanted to do and found a way to navigate that with what they needed to do to be in this world. I didn't know anyone. And so I was like, well, that's interesting. So I thought I basically had to come to the realization that no one was probably going to knock on my door and say to me, your dream job, here it is. You can go around, you can talk all about the metaphors of embodiment. You can write, you can lead retreats, you can go to beautiful places, you can have meaningful experiences, you can, be on the leading edge of a collective of the feminine that are remembering who they are, reclaiming their power. That was likely not going to happen. So I realized I had to create it myself. And the only way was going to be to like go first and to just invite people to my class, invite people to my first retreat. And so oftentimes people will say, well, how did you do it. And I felt like to write down all the incredible challenges, the depth of my suffering, the amazing teachers I found on the way, the the hero's journey, the heroine's journey that I don't think any human being is exempt from, to write down my particular version of it, so that if someone asked me, I could literally just hand them the book as like, listen, what's going to work for you is going to be uniquely yours.
Mm-hmm.
But on the off chance that you're called to this book, and if you're called to open it and if you're called to read it, I do trust that there's going to be something there that's going to inspire and encourage you to listen to yourself. So it just felt like it got to a point, like with the book, where the most in integrity thing I could do is like, I can't sit and have a conversation like this with everyone, but like I can through the book.
Mm.
So like anyone that's called to this way of being, and maybe they don't know someone who completely created and co-created their own reality, and the process that they went through, that here it is. Like, here's, the book, it's 9 chapters, but every chapter has a movement to embody the teaching, a ritual to honor it, a community exercise to be in that awareness with other people, and a pilgrimage to go on. And so it's really set up to like, this is what I did. Now you use these experiences to cultivate your own knowing and inner wisdom. So for me, and with a lot of people, I feel like, well, it's like, how do you do it? It's like, I think the saying that courage is when your desire gets bigger than your fear. It's like my desire to live into the life that I wanted was bigger than my fear of what people would think, or that I couldn't do it. And it's just at one point, the desire got bigger than the fear.
Yeah, it's funny to me that you mentioned how there was no one around you kind of doing what you wanted to do. And, the reason I started this Soul Purpose series, like, yes, I wanted to provide, quality and value to viewers. But at the end of the day, there was definitely a selfish reason in there, was that I felt the longing to connect with other people who were living a life of purpose and passion in the way that it worked for them, and not in the traditional way that you might see all the time, right? And it's like you put the invitation out there, and all of a sudden you recognize just how many people really are living in this way. But for some reason, when you're in, the 9-to-5 job and doing the things, checking all the boxes of, your form of life, you kind of forget that there are all these other people who aren't down the traditional path, And when I made the shift of like, okay, I'm leaving my job, this is what I'm doing 100% of the time, I really felt like the only way I'm going to be able to do this in a sustainable, like emotionally sustainable way, is to be able to connect with other people who have, paved their own path. Not necessarily people who are on the same path that I am, but just people who are trailblazers in that way, right? And are able to face the fear and face the resistance and take the step anyway. So with that book, what would you say was the hardest part about it? What was the biggest resistance you had with putting this together and offering it out to the world?
I mean, I literally thought I was going to be killed. I literally thought that I was going to be like people were going to be like, how could you say that? Like having these like past life fears of being like burned as a witch. Like, who do you think you are? Who do you think, you can't say things like that, and specifically saying things like that being around having an opinion around spirituality, the sacred, and the body that is somewhat counterculture to, I would say, the misinterpretation of many religious messages. And again, it's like, these are fundamental core belief systems that people have about themselves and the world. And so I know how tender it is. And it's like, if there's any way that we could not talk about it, like, I would love to avoid it. But the truth is that when we don't see our bodies as sacred, when we don't see women as sacred, and when we use, antiquated belief systems that were really enforced by power structures, like, we can't, everyone loses, and I just can't be on the side of history, or just, I can't even be a woman and not speak about the pain that is to just hold the sin of the world, you know, and so it was really interesting because I was in this moment of just really feeling this like so heavily, like just feeling like all the stories, all the oppression, all the like, you know, just really like just being also really mindful that a woman publishing a book like this, like, you know, like this is a recent thing, you know, maybe last 100 years, not even really 50, 20, 10, 2, you know, like, you know, of course there are women who've been doing things, but like there were few. Now there's more and more every day. But then I just said to Spirit, I was like, listen, I'm really having a hard time. Like, I literally feel like I'm going to be killed for this book. It's so dramatic. It's so extreme. And I was like, I need something. And so I just like Googled like women empowerment, you know, like just something. I need to watch something.
Yeah.
And what came up was a TED Talk by Jimmy Carter. And he said, you know, as a previous president of the United States, I've traveled to almost every country on the earth. I've met with their leaders. I've met with the people. And I can honestly say from my perspective, the number one human rights issue of our time is around women and the violence and the disrespect that is being put upon them because of the misinterpretation of religious scripture. And he's like, I've been a Baptist my entire life, and I have had to step away because I do not believe, and I am devoting the rest of my life to the support of women and their causes. And all of a sudden, it was like the one thing that I was the most scared of, like all of a sudden had a champion. And I was just crying at like the divine perfection to not feel alone and not feeling like this like very privileged person that has had all this time and energy to explore these more existential questions around spirituality and gender. And like that all of a sudden it was like a man who was in one of the most powerful positions on our planet was saying it. And in some ways it was like, oh, because he said it now, it like is, you know, giving, you know, some form of accreditation to what I'm saying. But like in terms of like power structures, yeah, he was.
Yeah.
You know, I felt like I could,
yeah.
I felt like I could stand stronger because Jimmy Carter stood stronger. And so it's this funny thing because people that know me well know that I'm like obsessed with Jimmy Carter because also like on a soul level, like he really showed up for me in that moment where like I needed to soothe the anxiety that I was having and that it's not really misplaced, like in terms of, you know, of history and of witch burnings and of, you know, many parts in the world right now where women who have the audacity to speak or pursue an education, like literally can be hunted.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to know that when we're talking about this, that yeah, it's incredible courage to stand up and use your voice because I personally believe that right now, present time, that a lot of our holding back they're more energetic. You know, it's not necessarily like, you know, we do have some things to overcome, but because of technology, I can like put my book out there. We can have these podcasts, we can have these conversations, but like the resistance is more energetic. But there are many places in the world where it is like quite dense and physical. And, you know, and my prayer is that we don't have to experience that again. And so I really want, and I really believe the more that we empower women and anyone on the side of love to use their voice, to do their work, to co-create a culture of respect and reverence, that we are creating a security for the freedom that I feel right now as a woman to write my book. You know, to basically say that this was my experience, knowing that some of it will offend people, but like that doesn't diminish that this is what happened and this is how I felt about it, and that there's place in the world for me to reflect on my own experience.
I don't know if you've had to deal with criticism or any kind of harsh, you know, fallback from the book, but if you have, how has it been? Like, how have you dealt with it? I'm always very curious about that because, you know, criticism, it's hard not to get affected by it, right? Like for me anyway, there's always like a little practice that I have to do to kind of recenter myself and, decide, do I want to accept this criticism? Is it constructive, or is this just someone projecting or whatever? Like there's a little process to it, but I'm always curious about other people, especially when they're doing it on a big scale like this, like a big scale of publishing a book where thousands and thousands and thousands of people are going to get to, now have an opinion about it, and maybe it won't be positive. So what do you do with that?
Well, I would say that for me, it's really important to stay in the center of your earnestness to be of service. So I know for me that if someone like is really offended by my book or my blog, it's sort of like, well, then don't read it. Like just like literally, like I didn't come to your house and force you.
Yeah.
Like that's not, this is meant for the people that feel resonance and a call with it. And for those that don't read it. Like literally just like, I'm so sorry that it's so offensive to you. I don't recommend that you continue reading.
Or maybe you need this book more than others.
Excuse me. I think the other thing is I took a leadership conference when I was in high school. And one of the things they offered has stayed with me, which is to know that 10% of the people, no matter what you do, are going to not like you or your work. Just like statistically, like 10% of the people aren't going to like it. 10% of the people are going to love what you do, no matter what. Like they're just going to like be like, oh my gosh, look at the way she walked across the street, like right, left, like that was amazing, and then 80% of the people are going to be influenceable. And so something for me has been like when there's that like 10%, of things, like it's also like putting it in context because, like on my Huffington Post blog, like there'll be all these people, but there's like a lot of people that like that's like, it's like their job to go harass people who write blogs on the Huffington Post, so it's like the context where I don't necessarily take it all the way into my heart versus like a close friend who has something. Like I had an experience where I wrote about my experience with plant medicine, specifically doing ayahuasca in my book. And I really contemplated that because can the culture understand the reverence, the prayer, the indigenous tradition around it in the way that I relate to it? Or do they just think I'm like writing about like doing drugs?
Yeah.
And it was like one of those things where I really was like, I don't want to offend. I don't want to be like encouraging people to do something that's not going to be healthy for them. Yeah. And at the same time, just the truth of it is this was a huge part of my journey. I'm so grateful that I had an access to that in a safe and respectful way of a tradition that had been doing it for thousands of years, an unbroken tradition, a way of connecting with the earth. And I decided to include it in the book, not because I thought it was right or wrong, but because it was true.
Yeah. Plain and simple, right? It was your truth that you were putting forth. And it's like, if I was going to be interested in that, you can bet that I would want to read about it from you, because the resources that, you have access to now maybe aren't going to be portraying it the way that you would have in your truth. So there's that 10% or whatever, there's like a percentage of the people there who are probably quite grateful and have learned a lot from that truth that you've, risked putting out there, really. But it's a wonderful thing. And what has been the best thing about writing this book? Made it all worth it?
Well, I would say like a lot of days I get messages from people and they completely fill my heart, because the book is about remembering the essence of who you are. So for people to have like a remembering, it's not like, oh, thank you so much for teaching me how, that knitting pattern, like although I think you can go into anything, and the depth of love and beauty is in everything. So it's like, if I was teaching knitting, it's like, oh my gosh, and then I knitted, this blanket for my first child, and it's going to be their baby blanket. Like, it could be that amazing. So I'm just using, I definitely don't want to demean anything else, but I just want to say that the types of messages that I've been able to receive, like, I guess the one yesterday was this woman who said, you wrote in the book that you never met your dad, but he showed up in the moment when it meant the most, like in conception. Like, he showed up so that you could be here. And even though you never met him, for 35 years after that, she said, my whole life I felt abandoned. I never met my father, but I realized, oh my gosh, he did show up. He did show up so I could be here. And she's like, I've had this huge perceptual shift and this forgiveness. And it was just this amazing thing. And then I received one today of a woman who's like, I'm rereading your book to get me through this like politically turbulent time, to just remember that healing is possible and transformation is possible. So, I think the best thing is just feeling like you can offer this, you can really be with people in a way through the book. Like, I didn't write the book or record the audiobook with the idea of like, here I am writing, Rochelle is writing, here I am. I always imagined someone reading it, and I imagined like them on their couch, like sipping tea, and like them having a conversation with me in person, that like I was in the book, like I was talking to them. And I'm so grateful for the moments where that intention that I placed was received. And I got that feedback loop that like, thank you so much for like having that conversation with me.
It sounds like a pretty satisfying experience, right?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. Do you have to be careful not to let it, I don't know, go to your head in a way?
Well, I think that's a really important thing, that whenever we're creating, or especially if maybe we're having like a more public persona, or our audience grows. And for me, it's just like being a really humble steward. It's like a paradox, because Qoya is not like something like Rochelle created. Qoya is an energetic of the feminine that goes by 10,000 different names, that I've just brought language to in a modern context through my lived human experience. But I don't own it. I'm a steward of it, and it's coming through me. And simultaneously, it came through me. Like, I am the person that like did all the things to lead me up to it so that I could be a receptacle of it. I'm the person that like quit everything else and focused on this so that it could live in the world. So it's that thing of like, I didn't create it, but I did steward it. And so for me, the words are like honor and humble. Like, I'm very honored that something that is so meaningful to me chose me to come through. I'm so honored that I was able to receive it. And I'm also like so humbled that I get to spend my life this way. But the only way that I get to do this is when people show up. Like, if no one shows up, if no one reads the book, if no one comes to the classes, if no one comes to the retreats, it's just me on a soapbox in a living room by myself. And so like, I just feel very awake and aware that like, as much as I'm like offering and being of service and trying to encourage others, that by others showing up, they're giving me the opportunity to know myself in a deep way, that I can show up, that I can support, that I can encourage, and that we are all co-creating this together. So for me, that's how I hold it. And that also just it doesn't feel like it's effortful. It feels like it's just like factual. Like, that's actually what's happening.
Yeah, that's really nice. Just the give and take in the relationship, right? It's not you pushing things onto people, but it's you like forming a relationship now with people all over the world who are getting to meet you through these pages of a book, or through, their earbuds when they're listening to the audiobook, which is pretty magical. That's how I feel about like my YouTube channel and all the stuff that I create. It's what I get back from people that makes it so magical and mind-blowing in so many ways. I don't want to keep you on too long. What I really would like to know from you is, usually when people like watch these kinds of interviews, they usually want to know if you can recommend some resources or some books that have really helped you along on this path. You know, going back to you who was in that 6-year relationship, you who still have the job, who needed the motivation or the inspiration or the guidance to start molding this life that you created, right? And really envisioned and made true for yourself. So of course, other than Qoya, your book, which we will recommend to viewers, of course, what are other books and resources that have really deeply affected you in a positive way?
The first one that comes to mind is Women Who Run with the Wolves by Dr. Clarissa Pinkola Estes. And it's a book that's quite dense and poetic, but it speaks to, like, if you really want to awaken the feminine, it's like we need the mythology, we need the narrative stories that have the nuance and the sensitivity and the metaphor to awaken that part of ourselves. So sometimes people, when they pick up that book, it's like it doesn't read like a normal linear story because it's not speaking to that part of yourself. And so I really recommend people and to just keep reading, like just pick it up. And like, maybe it's just a few pages, but like when you come up against that resistance, like, I'm not sure what's happening, you know, that you just keep reading, or to listen to any of her audiobooks. She has many of them and they're all fantastic because it's a vibration and a transmission of the feminine that she holds as a master storyteller that is completely a gift to humanity. It is really that profound.
Yeah, she is a master storyteller. I've listened to a couple of her audiobooks, and you're right. It's not like a traditional linear story with a start and an end, but it's very much worth it. And sometimes I'll just like pick up a book and just like open a page and I'm like, okay, I need a hit of guidance. Like just open it up and see what kind of messaging comes through. And it works a lot. So thank you so very much. As we wrap up, is there any other kind of little imparting wisdom that you would like to share to the audience?
Well, I would love to say, trust yourself and continue the practices that help you refine your ability to do that. Your yoga, your meditation, your time in nature. Spend time with the people that encourage you to be more of yourself. And spend more time doing the things where there's freedom to express yourself authentically. And so we're all in different life situations, but every time where you have a choice to choose the trusting of yourself and the expression of yourself, because I've found that that's where the magic, the synchronicity, the growth, and the enchantment really is. And, you know, sometimes we have to get out of the momentum tunnel to go in so that we can come out authentically. So whatever it is that you need, just really getting out of the habit of not listening to your needs of the body, of the mind, of quiet, of rest, of integration time. And then knowing that if you give that to yourself, when you emerge, there's going to be a clarity, a confidence that's going to serve you so that your actions and your words can really go as far as you need them to go.
Beautiful. Thank you so very much, Rochelle, for your authenticity and your openness and, I don't know, just your energy that I can really feel, you know, even via webcam, our technologies. Thank you so much. If people want to learn a little more about you or the services, the classes, the things that you offer, where can they find you?
It's Qoya.love, and that's Qoya.love.
Perfect. I will make sure to link that down below in the description box, guys, if you want to click. And I've also posted a link to Rochelle's book if you want to get it for yourself. I highly recommend it. Thank you so very much, Rochelle. It was an absolute pleasure to talk to you, and I wish you only success and magic in the future.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you, everyone that's listening. Blessings.